Well, welcome to the 700 Club. We're seeing bans on large gatherings, campaign rallies canceled. Airlines are now reducing domestic flights in America's first containment zone. The United States is fighting back against the coronavirus.
The number of cases here in the U.S. has reached a new threshold. In some of the hardest hit communities, officials are taking drastic measures. Dale Hurd begins our coverage.
As the number of cases of coronavirus in the U.S. passes 1,000, government officials, businesses, schools, and even political candidates are taking new steps to contain the virus. Some universities are going to online classes, and airlines are reducing domestic flights. On the campaign trail, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden both canceled rallies. And New Rochelle, New York, has been declared America's first containment zone.
It is a dramatic action. This is literally a matter of life and death.
The containment zone is a 1-mile radius around the Young Israel Synagogue, where dozens of people were exposed by a sick attorney. Dr. Anthony Fauci at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases warned the rest of the nation to take precautions.
It doesn't matter if you're in a state that has no cases or one case. You have to start taking seriously what you can do now.
Vice President Pence says over 1 million more test kits will be distributed to local areas by the end of the week. And President Trump is urging Americans to stay calm.
This was unexpected. It will go away.
Stocks gained almost 5% on Wall Street Tuesday as the Dow jumped more than 1,100 points, recovering about half of the market's historic losses from the day before. But the market is expected to remain volatile. President Trump is proposing a possible payroll tax cut to stimulate the economy, and it's likely the Treasury Department will extend the April 15 tax deadline to help individuals and businesses.
We're also going to be talking about hourly wage earners getting help so that they can be in a position where they're not going to ever miss a paycheck.
Economic advisor Larry Kudlow says the cut could last through the end of the year.
The payroll tax holiday is a bold move. It's a very bold move.
But Democratic leaders came out against it.
The administration seems to believe that the answer to any problem is another tax cut.
Most states aren't seeing the high number of cases like New York or California, but they're preparing for the worst. CBN's Eric Phillips shows us how Virginia health officials are getting ready.
Here in Central Virginia, government leaders are taking a regional approach where the coronavirus is concerned. Dr. Danny Avila serves as public health director for the city of Richmond and neighboring Henrico County. He says COVID-19's elusive nature makes it difficult to spot and stop.
One of the challenges is that when 80+% of individuals who get the virus have really kind of indistinguishable cold symptoms, they can transmit the virus to people who are much more susceptible to it without really knowing it.
That alone, he adds, significantly increases chances the disease spreads to this community.
I'm very concerned.
Why?
Because people don't know how to cover their mouth.
I'm scared for more older people and younger people, but not necessarily for myself.
Hoping to address growing concerns, health and emergency management leaders here have activated an incident management team for the region.
And so now, instead of each locality having to make their own kind of best guesses or decisions based on the information they have, that will all be streamlined through a regional infrastructure. The decisions that we make collectively about whether to hold a basketball game or, that affects not just the people in one locality, but those have regional implications.
That also includes decisions like closing schools, businesses, or even advising churches to cancel service.
I mean, if we're having widespread transmission and we're starting to see deaths here in Virginia, and again, I fully expect all of those things to happen, then I think there will be clear guidance to faith communities and congregations to say, maybe we do a web service this week or for this period of time. We probably do need to make changes in the way that we're delivering communion.
So I think the church has an opportunity here, really, to show that it will practice its faith over fear.
Richmond Community Church Senior Pastor Rick McDaniel says he doesn't foresee canceling any services.
I think we would always have church, and we always have the doors of the church open. We'd always have services, and then people would have to make up their own decisions about whether they want to come or not.
Now states have the ability to test locally for COVID-19 rather than having to send samples to the CDC in Atlanta. Still, Avila says the availability of test kits is limited, and the required criteria for testing means cases will slip through the cracks. Health officials stress people should not panic, but they should remain vigilant, realizing that curbing everyday social norms like shaking hands may be the safest idea. In Richmond, Virginia, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson joins us now for more on the response to the coronavirus. Lori, let me ask you this question. We've seen a steady increase. At what point in time can we start seeing this really get to epidemic proportions? Right now, we're dealing with 1,000 cases. What's the prognosis here? Are we looking at 10,000 in a week, 100,000 in a week? What's the multiplication here?
Gordon, yesterday, the White House Coronavirus Task Force held a news conference and addressed that very thing. They talked about their strategy for dulling or hampering a severe increase and a peak number of cases. They looked at places like China and South Korea and noticed that what's going on with this coronavirus is there's a steady increase, then there's a peak, and a lot of times that's when these governments are putting in these aggressive containment policies, and then they see the number of cases drastically decrease, and we're seeing that. And so what the American strategy is to go ahead and enact these strict containment policies now before it gets to that critical stage that you were talking about. In other words, to nip it in the bud, to head it off at the pass.
Okay, so what are we going to see in terms of containment? What kind of rules are we going to have to deal with?
Well, right now, the Coronavirus Task Force is encouraging Americans to enact some lifestyle changes that are different. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is the infectious disease specialist on the task force, said our life is very different now, and it's going to be very different now than it was a few months ago, but then reminded everyone that this is just temporary. So, specifically, what are we talking about? Well, the things that we've been talking about for the last few weeks as far as keeping your hands clean, staying home if you're sick, coughing in or sneezing into your arm, and so forth. But then also they've ramped it up a little bit, saying that everyone over the age of 60 should go ahead and right now get supplies that will last them for 2 weeks in case they need to self-quarantine. We're talking about food and medical supplies right now, because if you get tested positive, you're going to be asked to self-quarantine if you don't have very severe symptoms that would require hospitalization. So if you're tested positive for the coronavirus, the last thing you want to do is go out to the Walmart and start stocking up for 2 weeks and infecting everybody in the store. So they're asking people to do that kind of thing right now. Also, people over the age of 60 right now are being encouraged to avoid crowded areas. So places where they might have maybe 250 people or more, definitely to avoid those types of scenarios. And then there are those of us who are not at high risk, are also asked to take extreme precautions so that we don't infect people who are older, who might be more susceptible to serious complications from this virus.
All right, Lori, thanks for the insights. If you want to learn more about how you can protect your health, we have some fact sheets available for you. The one I recommend is Protect Your Gut. If you have a really good gut, all the wonderful bacteria that they really help you against any kind of immune response to this kind of an infection. So we've got it for you. It's absolutely free. It's called Protect Your Gut. Call us 1-800-700-7000. And if you're over 60 like me, please look at these guidelines and say, okay, I need 2 weeks worth of medicine. I need 2 weeks worth of supplies. If I get into contact with this and I'm forced to go into a self-quarantine, I'm going to be able to do that and spend 2 weeks as an introvert and just stay home. And that way you're not going to infect anyone else. And Lord willing, you're not going to get the infection yourself. Well, in other news, Joe Biden is on a clear path to the Democratic nomination for president after scoring big wins in Tuesday's primaries. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. Joe Biden's decisive victory in the key battleground state of Michigan widens his delegate lead over rival Bernie Sanders. The former vice president also won primaries in Missouri, Mississippi, and Idaho, dealing a serious blow to one of the last remaining primary opponents for the Democratic nomination. Biden leads Sanders in the delegate race, 836 to Sanders' 672. Well, the United States House is seeking to reform a surveillance law that was misused for political purposes in the Russia probe. Congress created the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, to guard against abuse by spy agencies. But a Justice Department investigation found that an application for a warrant to spy on a 2016 Trump campaign aide contained misinformation. Lawmakers want several revisions before renewing the law, including stronger congressional oversight in the FISA process and punishing those who abuse the FISA court. And Gordon, whatever deal is struck still has to pass in the Senate.
Well, what's going to happen in a divided Senate is up in the air, but here's some bottom line. The FBI agents that put that false information in front of the FISA court are now barred for life for ever asking for another warrant, FISA warrant again. So there is some teeth here, but this is incredible. And you look at the abuse that happened in 2016, and how did we ever get to this surveillance state where somehow people in the FBI think it's perfectly okay to start surveillance of a presidential campaign? It's mind-boggling that they would do that, and then even further mind-boggling that they would lie. That's what's been proven, that they gave false information to the FISA court in order to get that warrant. What are the consequences? And in my personal opinion, it needs to be far more than you're banned from applying for further warrants. There needs to be some really strong action. We cannot have a surveillance state, particularly for our political campaigns. This is not the America we want to have.